This astaxanthin supplement, I hear it's 6,000 times stronger than vitamin C, 100 times stronger than vitamin E, and 800 times stronger than CoQ10?
Yes, astaxanthin supports joint health, memory health, even anti-aging and immune health. This Hawaii brand delivers 3 times more nature-identical astaxanthin to your body and is a better buy than the competition. It's called Xanthicin. Safely manage your inflammatory health with Xanthicin. It's pure and highly absorbed, providing greater benefits. Visit getxantho.com and these retailers.
All right, everybody, how's it going? Another episode here on Hawaii Football Now. We're up to like episode 15, I think it is. I've already lost count, Hunter, where we're at. But big mahalos to our sponsor, our presenting sponsor, Xanthicin, as well as our other sponsor, Spectrum Mobile. We head into the first full week of December with a lot to talk about. Last week was wild. We had to re-record things after we recorded early last week, and then all kinds of things happened. We had to re-record. Hopefully you had an opportunity to check that episode out as we released that last week, Friday. And there was a lot to get to. And quite honestly, things seem to still be very much evolving as Hawaii will be basically 2 weeks out from the Hawaii Bowl when this episode is released. Later on this week on Thursday, we record this as we typically do on Tuesday of the week. You had the high of the Wyoming win leading to the low of several key transfers, to the sort of visceral reaction, if you will, from alums, fans, etc., to the surprise of the bowl invite, as well as some of the, negative aspects that keep swirling around the program, if you will. And it kind of still has a bit of a feel that there is a negative cloud lingering over the program, and we will get into that a little bit more as we go. Hunter, but as we get this thing going, what is the last, few days after we previously recorded last week, Friday? What has it been like? I'm sure you talk to people, right? I mean, this isn't to say that we are in positions of prominence or anything like that, but just talking to like friends, people I see at the grocery store, acquaintances, a lot of people just talking, hey, like what's up with Hawaii football, right? And that's usually the case when things are good, things aren't so good. That had been the case throughout the season, but particularly within the last week or so. I've had a lot of conversations with people who just want to talk UH football, which I guess you could argue is a good thing, right? Any publicity is good publicity, the old saying.
Mm-hmm.
But what's it been like for you, man, over the last few days and week?
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels kind of mirrored to our overall COVID experience, right? Where you see a friend you haven't in a while, and you kind of check with like, hey, what's like the latest restrictions? Are we allowed to eat out? Do we need the vaccine card? Like week in, week out, it felt like there's something new, something that they've announced that is apparently law that we aren't aware of. The communication and everything. It's a very rolling with the punches kind of a feel, Jordan, with the last 2 to 3 weeks with University of Hawaii football. And few people follow it more than you and I, but it's felt like, oh my goodness, now there's this, now there's that. Kind of feel like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to put all the pieces together. But yeah, even friends that are not necessarily connected to UH football, there's wind in the air, and it smells like smoke coming from University of Hawaii, the football program. And yeah, people are asking me for answers, and I'm like, I don't have them, man. I really don't. I'm in a very similar position as you guys are. But if nothing else, Jordan, the season's not over, man. We've been miraculously given another bowl game in Todd Graham's second straight year. And yeah, man, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild, to say the least.
Yeah, it really is, right? And it's been a while, I think, since there's this been sort of organic public discourse about the program, right? A lot of it had been sort of with the condemning of Aloha Stadium. That spurred a lot of public discussion. The coaching change, that spurred a lot of public discussion. But because this team was playing behind closed doors, because it was playing in front of restricted fans, like I think it limited, right, sort of fan involvement, fan participation, if you will. And this, not necessarily for great reasons, but has spurred quite a bit of discussion, right? Quite a bit of interest. And so I think that it's almost impossible to avoid talking about Hawaii football without talking about the gossip, the rumors, like the drama that comes with it, and whether that is fair to the program, whether that is fair to the coaching staff. It's kind of unavoidable. I think at this point, the way things have sort of evolved, the conversation and speculation persists because I'm with you, right? I mean, we don't have access inside the program. We don't know exactly what's going on. Everybody hears, things here and there, but yeah, I can't confirm or one way or another on a lot of these things. But, I think it persists in part because of what we saw last week with the departures, which were huge red flags, right? I think that's fair to point out. Yeah. And then the Twitter space transgression that happened and all of the comments that were shared in that arena. And then in part because of head coach Todd Graham's sort of response to questions about that, right? And about speculation that there was widespread discontent within the locker room, right? He said basically he's not on Twitter. He didn't hear specifics. This was at his media availability at the end of last week. He didn't really hear specifics, but he was confident in his staff and that they were doing things the right way. And part of his quote was, "I don't read Twitter. I don't do those things. I can tell you that my deal is focusing on being positive." And he also went on to say, "We know we're doing things the right way." And so that, and again, 500 record through 2 years. Which is a lot better than most 2-year stretches of University of Hawaii football. And so that, I think there was hope from a lot of folks that looked at this program a little more positively than others that, hey, look, they'll address this internally. They don't really need to address it too publicly. It is what it is. This happens at every program. We move on. We got a bowl game to prepare for. Yeah. The problem is things haven't really quite quieted down, right? Things have become national. And we'll get to that here in just a second. But because of the national now coverage, you got an SF Gate article from freelance journalist Mark DeLucci just on Monday that makes some pretty damning claims about the current state of things within the program. And we can get into the details. But Hunter, curious to get your take with the fact that this is now garnering national attention. It's gotten reaction from national media members who write for The Athletic, who write for national publications. It's kind of impossible to ignore at this point, right? Publicly, like it'll just persist if it's not addressed in a more public manner than just saying, hey, we're moving on.
Yeah, totally. And I get the old school mentality of I don't read Twitter, I don't pay attention to those sort of things, but we're in 2021, man. And as the head coach of a Division I football program where you are leading millennials and Generation X young men, you got to be connected in this world. I'm not saying that has to be your sole focus, but you got to be with it, man. You got to be woke to some degree, or you're just not going to be able to connect with these guys. So it's kind of a middle of the road situation. I understand, because you don't want to be so invested over there where that takes up all of your thinking, all of your perception on things. I even noticed that about Rolo. Rolo was so in the Twitter space that it kind of messed with the way that he went about stuff sometimes. But then you don't want to be so far on the other side of things where you almost become naive or just you don't care. You don't care is not good. You want to care about every aspect of how people see and experience your football program, in my opinion. And so, yeah, I think with college football too, everything depends on recruits and garnering a great relationship with players and the players' families. And now that this thing is national, you have to start thinking, oh man, what is that? What are the implications here, not only for the players that are currently on the team, but ones that you are trying to bring into this program right now? Because anybody and their mom can, just forward an article like the SF Gate article, which we're going to get into here in just a little bit, to a player, to a player's parent. Hey, I heard you guys were, thinking about Hawaii. Did you see this? Are you aware of this? It's a much bigger deal than just us, here locally talking about stuff. It has vastly surpassed that at this point.
Yeah, and so we can kind of turn our attention to that now, right? Again, Mark DeLucci putting this article out there yesterday, again making some pretty damning claims about the current state of things within the program, and when at least it comes to the players' perspective. And I do think it's fair to point out before we dive into the details that none of the 8 players who were quoted by DeLucci attached their names to the comments, right? All comments were anonymous. Also, DeLucci states in the article that he did reach out via phone and email to inquire with Coach Graham, but did not receive a response. SF Gate also did not receive a response from athletic director David Matlin at the time of this story being published on Monday. And so whether the comments from the players were warranted, whether you want to put in stock to the fact that nobody attached their name to these comments, regardless, it is now a national story, as we pointed out, right? Notable national writers have chimed in with tweets. We're really via retweets of DeLucci's article on Twitter. The Athletics' Chris Vanini, right, who is one of the more prominent writers when it comes to college football. He said, quote, "Been hearing rough things coming out of Hawaii in recent weeks and had started digging into it. Mark got the story out." And then he continues on, "Players do not like Todd Graham and nobody thinks they can/will buy him out. So they're transferring," and tweet. And that's what Vanini put out there. And then Stuart Mandel, who has written for a couple of different publications, is now with The Athletic as well. He said in his retweet, quote, "Hawaii players have had enough of Todd Graham," and tweet. And so when you've got those out there, right, those are going to garner a lot of reactions via the Twitter space, if you will. They're going to garner a lot of replies, a lot of retweets. And as you point out, Hunter, it can easily be shared, right? And it has been via social media. I've seen it on all kinds of platforms, Facebook, Reddit, which has a pretty large college football presence as well, on Twitter, all of the social media basically platforms. And so it takes on a life of its own, right? And in the modern age, when it comes to optics and PR and getting in front of stories and doing kinds of things, and again, this all may not be true. It all may be well overblown, but it's almost impossible to ignore at this point. And so instead of talking about a bowl game at home, this has really been the dominant topic of conversation when you bring up Hawaii football. And Hunter, some of the things in the article are troubling, right? Basically the overarching theme of DeLucci's article is, quote, that Graham has fostered an unsustainable, troublesome environment during his brief tenure that overshadows any tenuous on the field achievements, which I would agree with, right? This is very much overshadowing the fact that they have now gone to 2 consecutive bowl games and 4 total in the last 4 years. It is very much overshadowing some of the late season success where they looked really good against Colorado State and really, really good against Wyoming in the final week of the year to pick up that 6th win, which eventually gets them into the Hawaii Bowl, in part because of some other circumstances, an added bowl game and all things like that. But that's not what anybody wants to talk about when you bring up Hawaii football. And you hear things in the article, and you've heard it echoed sort of on social media that, a lot of players have lost their love or passion for football. You have allegations of verbal abuse from players and the language being used directed at them. You have sort of this environment of discontent amongst the players. Again, verbal abuse being alleged, guys having playing time threatened, complaints of general lack of care, not taking the time to get to know players. And so a lot of these different things are directly cited, again, via anonymous sources in DeLucci's article. And so what was your reaction, Hunter, kind of reading through this? Because we both got a chance to read this and thought it was, obviously very pertinent, as it was released the day before we record these things. But, how much of that is, you've played for this program, you've played at this level. How much of that is look, this happens at programs. You're going to have guys unhappy, as opposed to these are seriously troubling developments if proven to be true.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's troubling, Jordan, to get some real, like, concrete statement stories of what we've kind of been feeling subconsciously about what's been going on, and actually reading it I hurt for my alumni, for my for the guys that were sold on coming and playing for Hawaii, and then it not being delivered in the way that it was probably portrayed. That hurts me, because I think I can speak for all alumni of University of Hawaii that we care deeply about this program, this team, and the community as a whole. And so when things come out like this, it hurts all of us. Well, I feel hurt for these guys. So I wanted to say that first. And then I wanted to get to this. When you're on a football team, your experience is different from anybody else's. If you are a starter, you are, let's take a guy like Darius Muasau, for instance, multiple year starter, backbone of our defense, Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year, accolades left and right, where the coaches, the team, the state of Hawaii depends on you. Okay. Your experience day in, day out with the coaching staff, their attention to you, their just overall care for you is going to be a little bit different than, say, someone like myself, who was a true walk-on, was not on the team, not offered a position on the team, earned one through a walk-on tryout. We just bring different things to the table. And from a coaching perspective, when you've got two guys that bring two different things to the table, you have to give more attention to the one that's actually going to help you win football games on Saturday. Not saying that the walk-on like myself doesn't provide value on scout team, overall morale, can be leaders and influencers on the team, even if you aren't on the field. Just trying to portray it for people listening online, what it's like for different levels of players in an environment like University of Hawaii football. And so the way that, I even think back to members of the Chow era, whenever they spoke to me, it was definitely a little bit different than how they spoke to Taylor Graham or Ikaika Woosley, the guys that were competing for the starting role compared to the fourth string quarterback. That's just the way that it goes. Now, if you've made it all the way to Division I football, you're tough. The way that you just are able to be resilient, that, coaches have said things in the past that you're like, okay, that was not my favorite thing to hear, but we're not at church right now. We're in a Division I football environment where they are trying to direct 120 full-grown men, and a lot of times you got to use certain language to direct the cattle, if you will. Okay, I'm speaking in hyperbole here, obviously, but there in the last 10, 15, 20 years, with some rules that have been changed in the NCAA, things have changed. Things have changed really in the entire time that even a guy like Coach Graham, who's been coaching for a very long time, the environment that he creates is just different. Players expect to be treated a little bit differently. Old school guys might even say a little soft. If you were to go back to the Paul Bear Bryant days of Alabama, in the OG days, I'm sure they said all sorts of stuff to their players. And so I kind of hold all of that in there, that you never want to insult a player's character. You never want to go after their integrity as a person. I think that's where the line is drawn for me. Like, yeah, if they're not cutting it on the field, you can do it without emotion. Hey man, we got to pull you off. You weren't doing your job. We're trying to win games here. There's an element to that. So there's definitely a line. Now I'm going to say there's even a stronger line when you are a guy like Coach Graham, who touts very proudly that he wants to be a God first, faith first, family driven program that takes a knee and says a prayer at the end of every practice, every game. We see it down there. And then this stuff comes out. I mean, if you want to be a hard-nosed, no BS kind of a coach in my way or the highway, fine, do your thing. This guy's tough, but that's kind of the environment that we were expected to. But when you preach a different thing methodically to your players, and it's not brought forth in that way, then there's going to need to be some answers to those questions. That's kind of where I'm at with all of this.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. And the conversation now, right, unfortunately, has shifted away from, hey, are they running the right offense?
Yeah,
totally. Are the coordinators experienced enough? Do they have enough support to produce the product on the field, right? That's not the conversation anymore. The conversation has turned much more into how a football program operates and like how a coach should treat players. And that's never a great place to be when it comes to the speculation around your program. And I think, it's really interesting to see over the next few weeks leading into this bowl game, how things are addressed internally as well as publicly. Because I think, if you want to get into, and we can talk about this in the second half as well, when we get to some of the comments we've received, from Facebook and YouTube, and just how you treat players, right? Old school versus new school, which I think gets a little overblown and it becomes a little too polemic at times. Because look, if you're a believer in that, if you're a believer in tough coaching and certain language and whatnot, like, okay. But if it's not resonating, right? If it doesn't resonate with your players, if it forces your players to leave at a higher than normal clip, if it forces, even if it's just a couple of players, starters, right? Key guys, right? You're talking about, and I don't know the reasons, right? We don't know the reasons. But if it has indeed proven to sort of relate back to this for Dede Hunter, Chevin Cordero, Cameron Lockridge, who's now transferring, and then you got a fourth basically, right, in Kai Kaneshiro, who left the team and I believe has declared that he's just done playing football. He's not going to look at transferring. Then you got to kind of reevaluate, right? I mean, that's just kind of the fact of the matter. Or you just completely change over the roster, which I guess is the other option, to bring in players that fit your mold, right? I guess that is the only other option, but I just don't know how many of those guys exist in 2021. You can call it a softer generation. You can call it whatever you want, but those are the players. That is the player force, if you will, workforce, if you want to use that type of language. Because I mean, when you look at it, right, like if you were to do that, if like a professor was to call a student like that in the classroom, again, with this alleged language, like we'd have serious problems, right, on our hands.
Awesome.
And so a couple questions for you, Hunter, as we sort of wrap up this first half of the discussion, right? Is addressing it internally sufficient, or does it need to be something that is addressed a little more publicly? Because word is, the team had like a beach day over the weekend. Coach Graham hosted a team event where I believe everybody was involved, or at least invited, right? I don't know if everybody showed up. I don't have that kind of RSVP list or anything like that, but there seems to be some opportunities taken during the long layoff now between now and the bowl game to build on team, if you will. Is that sufficient? Does it need to be addressed a little more publicly? And what kind of opportunity does the fact that they're playing in this bowl game present, where if it had been the end of the season, it seemed like everybody was just ready to bail, right? But now that they've got 3 extra weeks, does it, it kind of brings everybody back together, forces everybody to sit down in the same room and maybe give them an opportunity to work their way through this?
Yeah. No, a few things are coming to mind, Jordan. Looking at that article again, it wasn't just players' experiences, but they were citing some behavior from coaching staff that were afraid to ask more clarifying questions of Coach Graham, but elected not to do so out of fear of getting yelled at. And so from a player's perspective, when you're trying to do your job well, you have to be coached well by your position coach. And then if he's not able to get clarification from the head coach, it produces an overall environment of unhealth, if you will. And I think I'm being very political in saying that right there. And so hearing that this is an overall environment that needs fixing. I got a couple of very close friends that are on the team right now. The athletic director, Dave Matlin, put together a closed door meeting with the players just yesterday to speak in confidence with them. And I'm guessing probably to gather some recon on their experience, what has been going on, so that he can do his due diligence in getting some answers on all of this stuff. And if there is real validity to some of this stuff, who knows what could transpire with Mr. Matlin and this coaching staff. So I don't have any hard answers on what that was like or anything like that. I'm sure if there is anything sufficient, we're going to hear about it. Yeah, man, I'm really at kind of a loss here. We obviously there's a bowl game to prepare for. There is things to look forward to with this program, but there's it feels bigger than just stuff going on in the locker room with enough of a narrative has been created right now that there needs to be something established. So yeah, man, I'm glad we still have football to be played, but this can't be ignored any longer, Jordan.
Yeah, and I think that's encouraging to hear, right? If conversations are taking place, because right, I mean, whether it's this article, whether it's the fact that according to 24/7 Sports, Hawaii has 9 players entered in the transfer portal this season. That's the most of any other team in the Mountain West, and more than New Mexico, right? No other program has more than 6, and that's New Mexico. And most of the other teams in the program conference, the majority of the teams in the conference have like 3 or fewer at this point. And that doesn't include Kai Kaneshiro, who's walking away from football. So that would be a 10th guy. So it's whether it's the article, more tangible things such as guys in the transfer portal, like there are telltale signs that there is, something amiss within the program. And I think it would be, or I think it needs to be the responsibility of folks in administrative positions, right? Like athletic director David Matlin, to at least ask the questions, right? And speak to the players and find out what is going on. Because as we point out, like these are anonymous sources in the article, right? And I'm not questioning Mark DeLucci's journalistic integrity or anything like that. I'm not saying that what he has written is,
there's got to be an investigation,
non-factual at all, but it does need to be followed up on. Like, yeah. I think at the very least, right, it does need to be followed up on, and for the folks within the program to really find out, what is going on and how do you move forward. And I think that bowl game come December 24th will be a very telling moment, right? Because you're going to have to put a team on the field. Who's still around? How do they perform? Are they willing to go out there and put on a good display, like regardless of result, but just going out there and competing, which we had seen late in the season, and do those guys still go out and do that after this has been aired out a little more publicly than it had been prior to Colorado State or Wyoming? And the fact that, look, this is going to be on national television, and I got to imagine those national television broadcasters, like they're going to talk about this. Like they wouldn't be doing their job covering the game if they're not talking about this.
Now, Jordan, I wanted to say this. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I'm just remembering this. I had breakfast with a current player on the team, just yesterday, and we were at a local breakfast spot, and one of the assistant coaches walked into the restaurant. He was with his family, um, and player was excited to see the coach, so he walked over there and said hey to him. The guy said hey back, but his body language and the way that he acted, it wasn't even like he was excited to see him. He barely turned his head, and it was just a hey kind of a situation. Now, I don't know the interaction between that player and that coach, if they have drama, if something has been, but you never know what has gone down. All I know is any of my previous coaches, good, bad, or the ugly, the ones that I was close to, the ones that I wasn't close to, they are stopping whatever they do in that moment, turning around and hugging and embracing one of their own out in public. If you are a college football coach, you are there to impact lives. You are there to be there for your student athletes, who at the end of the day are the ones that are going to make you successful. So I don't know if it was necessary drama between this coach and this player, or a telling metaphor of what this program truly is like from top to bottom. Coaches that don't necessarily like being here, players obviously that are turning down name, image, and likeness deals to leave here. It's definitely worth something that these national broadcasters are probably going to bring up during our bowl game. Exactly what you said.
Yeah, and so there's, again, by the time this is released, about 2 weeks to kind of get ready for that game, both from a football standpoint and from a team morale, culture standpoint, and what that looks like, what the product looks like come Christmas Eve when they take the field at Ching for the Hawaii Bowl. And we'll see what kind of crowd they get as well, and what the feedback and voice from the community will be in terms of who attends and what that atmosphere is like against Memphis again in just a couple of weeks' time. So we'll take a quick break, come back, get into a little more of the bigger picture discussion as well surrounding this program. But again, a reminder, only one brand delivers 3 times more astaxanthin than the competition, and that is Xanthicin. What is astaxanthin? Glad you asked. It helps with joint and muscle function, helps with cholesterol and cognitive health as well. Astaxanthin is even recommended by doctors and pharmacists for its anti-aging qualities. Available at getxantho.com, Newtown Square Pharmacy, Down to Earth Kaka'ako, and PharmaCare Hawaii as well. Again, get all your information at getxantho.com, getzantho.com to learn more.
This is Hawaii Football Now from ESPN Honolulu.
Okay, second half time. We're getting into some bigger picture questions. We've sort of delayed. We got into some of this last week, but then we had to re-record, and then we had to cut it out. But some questions that have come in over the last few weeks from some of the listeners and viewers of HFN, whether on Facebook, YouTube, or any of the podcast listening platforms as well. We do appreciate everybody who takes the time to listen to us blabber about every week. As well as the folks who take the time to offer a little input themselves. We had a few comments, Hunter, that I wanted to get into that kind of brought up interesting points when you think about it, right? We had the Hawaii diehard fan V839 on YouTube. I love it. He said, "I think Graham is a decent coach. Fire the OC, lecture the DC. For Hawaii players, you don't like the coach, leave the program." Which I will say, the OC is his son. The DC is Todd Graham. So it might be a little tough to fire the OC and then lecture himself on that. And then, but I bring up that comment because we did have several other comments talking about, hey, look, if these guys aren't quite cut out for this coaching staff, aren't willing to put in the time and sacrifices for this program, then, hey, maybe this program isn't for you. Maybe this coaching staff isn't for you. And folks, pointing out different instances or different reasons, I guess I could say, why, hey, this coaching staff, Todd Graham and company, are getting a bad rap, why they have been put behind the 8 ball, which I think there are some fair points to be made there, things that we have discussed, quite honestly, over the life of this podcast. But what are your thoughts on that, right? Because it's like, hey, look, some of these players, right? It's like, are they whining in this instance? Are they complaining? Are they not tough enough, to kind of go through this? Are they bailing on a commitment to the program? You hear some of those points brought up when it comes to this, I think, broader discussion on, what a player should endure, how a player should be coached up. And I know you touched on this a little bit, Hunter, in the first half of the podcast, but it isn't just, I bring this up to say that it isn't universal. It isn't like everybody is bagging on the coaching staff. It isn't like everybody is completely taking the player's side if there are sides to be taken in this conversation. There are folks that I think, firmly believe that, hey, look, a firm authoritarian coach that is going to be tough on players, like, that's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah. It's a complex issue. So the transfer portal was never even really an option until maybe like 3-4 years ago.
Fair.
Where it became a real prevalent thing, and the vast majority of people are still getting educated in it, including myself. What is this? What are the rules there? And with that comes a new way of doing things. And I'd speak just for myself. I fall a little bit more on the old school side of the argument here. I'm a big believer in thriving where you're planted and not trying to uproot and go somewhere else. If you are in that environment, you can change it for the better. That's just the way that I'm wired. And so I do understand that in a certain capacity, like the powers that be are there. And in life, you're not always going to have the opportunity to say, there's something wrong with my boss. There's something wrong with my coach. Well, perhaps there could be something wrong with you, speaking from the perspective of a player. Have you really done everything on your part to be the best football player that you could be? Is there some truth? Is there some validity from what these coaches are saying? There's always good mixed in with the bad, Jordan. So I think that's where this guy is coming from. However, I do want to just clarify one thing. Shevin finished the year out for us. At the time, whenever he made that decision, the Hawaii Bowl was not on the table. And in all actuality, the Hawaii Bowl came out of nowhere. It was declared that we were not bowl eligible. It was said that with a 6-7 record, there were not enough bowl eligible teams, and we weren't going to go. And he waited, unlike some other players who kind of made their decision with games to be played on the schedule. Shev did not leave our team high and dry. He finished it out as best as he could. And for him, this is the best decision, that he's going to make. And in this new climate of college football, some power and some decision-making is being put in these players' hands. For better or worse, that is just the current state. And we are moving in a more progressive manner towards players being able to do that. So it's definitely a complex issue with not a simple yes or no answer there. So I understand, Hawaii diehard fan VA39. We understand where you're coming from. We're there with you, man.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point and really good perspective. And so one last sort of big overarching picture, and our guy Nick actually wrote this to us several weeks ago. And again, with things kind of hectically changing last week, we didn't really get to put it in the podcast, but he brings up some interesting points. It actually gave us a well thought out and kind of lengthy question and points, kind of talking about, hey, everybody is pointing the blame at Todd Graham and the coaching staff when that's more scapegoating them as opposed to some of the problems. And again, this question came in much earlier than some of the recent developments when it came to the transfers and this SF Gate article and things like that. But he was talking about, a lot of the criticism of the coaching staff when it came to on-field performance and the X's and O's of things. And in particular, the offense and Bo Graham on that side. And he brought up the points of, they lost 3 assistant coaches on the offensive side of the football between last season and this season. There wasn't really a great opportunity to hire highly qualified replacements for those guys, GJ Kinney, Brendan Marion, Tony Hall. GJ Kinney, who was the offensive coordinator, Brendan Marion, who was the wide receivers coach, and then Tony Hall, who was technically the co-OC and inside receivers coach as they left for UCF Pitt and Louisiana Monroe, respectively. And he talked about, some of the hiring freezes that sort of lasted throughout the COVID season. And so you end up hiring a couple of guys, in Alik Terry and Marcus Davis, who were highly successful players, but had only had graduate assistant experience, hadn't had full-time assistant experience. And so basically saying that, hey, we are blaming the wrong person, just generally, not necessarily us here, perpetuating the blame to the scapegoat and not the state and UH that restricted their budget, didn't allow them to hire anyone qualified for these positions. Nick goes on to talk about, some of the university realities, if you will, and they were sort of forced to just reshuffle some of the existing staff, and the budget constraints that come with all of that. And again, thanks to Nick, and sorry we couldn't kind of read through everything, just time permitting here. But I think it brings up a really interesting point in what we talk about this year, right? Because it's all interrelated. I mean, you got the folks on one end of the spectrum who are calling for Todd Graham's job, but also that involves a buyout and paying coaches and paying a new coach and all kinds of things like that. And you got folks on the other end of the spectrum who are in full support of the current coaching staff, pointing to those same financial constraints and saying, look, they got a rough hand, right? They're not playing with a full deck. They're not able to really accomplish the things that they're setting out to do because of those financial constraints. And so I'm kind of curious to you, Hunter, because this sort of reminds me of a conversation I've had with different people and over, the water cooler, folks in a little more serious conversations that, all in all, I think it absolutely falls on everyone within the UH administration for any sort of lack of success. But I think this is also why you need someone to operate within those realities. Like we often talk about, like it needs to be a Hawaii guy or somebody with Hawaii ties or somebody with knowledge of Hawaii. And I think that often comes across as like this thumbing of the nose at outsiders or, an air of self-righteousness from Hawaii people. Well, I think, you can make that case. I think it also, more than anything, kind of comes also with the negative aspect of that. The reason I advocate for somebody like that, of that background, is because you need somebody who's aware of the harsh realities. You need somebody who's aware of the local politics that is involved. Again, Hawaii is unique for very positive reasons, but there are also very frustrating realities. And so to Nick's point, yes, that is absolutely true. All of those things, the lack of financial support, the bureaucracy, the red tape, all of these things that are just nightmarish for anybody to succeed in this program. You kind of need somebody who is aware of all of that and willing to handle that at that program. I'm not saying Todd Graham can't turn into that guy or hasn't started to learn those things, but it is very hard to come in here and win football games when you are dealing with a lot of the muck, if you will, that comes with just sort of how things work here, which isn't great.
Totally. I mean, look at the history of Hawaii football. We've had transformative, once in a generation coaches not able to stay because we won't pay them. They do exactly what we've asked them to do, if not better. And everyone, at least from the fans' perspective, wants Hawaii football to keep growing, keep building. But the powers that be, wherever they are, whether it be, UH president, the governors that actually dictate, because we're a public university, funding for our football program, it's a different environment than, say, something like LSU, who just dropped the equivalent of purchasing Mars to get Kelly down there from Notre Dame. It's a completely different environment out here, and we seem to always these coaches are left to kind of make do with lemons, trying to make lemonade. At least that's the perception from me, and I'm sure for a lot of people like Nick. I really appreciate that comment, Nick, because yeah, even former players, we've wondered, man, why did Coach Abe go to running backs coach? I mean, he by far is probably one of the best recruiters that we have in the program right now. It does just beg the question, do we, need to make do with where we're at? It starts to answer some things like, yeah, why don't we have a special teams coach? What is going on here? So I understand all of those things, and there may be some, and we've dealt with that this year. So there are larger issues at hand that we have had to roll with the punches with. We see that. We understand that some of this stuff may or may not be completely Todd Graham's fault. But the stuff we talked about in the first half, from a player's perspective, that those specific things, someone needs to account for those things. So I definitely understand here, and I'm hoping that we can hire the right people for those positions with fiscal year 21 coming to an end, and we can potentially hire some people for those spots.
Yeah, it's all part of the bigger picture discussion, right? When it comes to University of Hawaii football, how to properly support this program, how to properly support a head coach, how that head coach operates within the harsh realities of being the football coach in the current structure that is flawed in a lot of ways here in Hawaii, how they adapt culturally and all these things. Like, they are all interconnected. There is no doubt about it in this sort of ecosystem of college football and the unique place that Hawaii fits into that ecosystem. And all that goes forward. That'll kind of do it for us on time. We'll save some of the overtime discussion for next week. Who knows what there will be to discuss when we reconvene in a week's time. Hunter, all of these things continue to develop. We hope things turn for the better. We hope there is some positive news to come out of all of this, but I think it was only fair and prudent to kind of dive into this a little bit further, because it had become national news on Monday. Like, there was no avoiding it. Trending topics on Twitter, national conversations taking place in different spaces. It's been a tumultuous last 10 days or so for the University of Hawaii, and that includes wins against Wyoming and a bowl berth against Memphis. So it has been the full spectrum and range of emotions. But we will have plenty more to talk about as we continue out the rest of this calendar year, and we head into the bowl game and then into the recruiting season and all that comes with it in the never-ending calendar that is college football. Hunter, always appreciate it, man. Great insight. Love these conversations, and we'll be sure to have more to go. You have a great rest of your week. Everybody else have a great rest of your week. And again, we'll see you next week on Hawaii Football Now, presented by Xanthison. Big mahalo to Spectrum Mobile as well. You can hit me up on Twitter at Jordan Helly, at All Around ATH for Hunter. Leave us your comments, questions. We'll have a lot more time for those as we move throughout the rest of this month as well. We'll see you next week, Hunter. Have a good one, man.
You too, bro.
Aloha, everybody.
You've been listening to Hawaii Football Now with Jordan Helly and Hunter Hughes, all from ESPN Honolulu.